the house.
Ah, there we
I
go.
think I think we're live. Yes.
Yeah.
Welcome everyone, whoever comes in. I'm very happy to be here today with my special guest, Domenica Marchetti.
Oh, you pronounced it right.
I'm sure that's a rarity. What have you heard normally? How do they say it? Marchetti?
Marchetti,
Marchetti?
Domenica, Monica. I get all sorts of variations, but yeah.
Okay. So I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about that because I'm super interested in all of that kind of cultural stuff, and I have so many questions about Italian American, all because I'm sure you have a lot of insights into it. But you go. I don't know how to introduce you. Maybe I'll let you do that by yourself.
Oh, okay.
Because you do a lot of different things. I know you obviously as a writer. I follow your Substack, and by the way, everyone, please sign up to Buona Domenica, which is such a great title. Which is obviously a pun on your
Thank
name, but
you.
also a good Sunday, as we say in Italian.
Yeah.
So maybe tell us, how would you describe yourself? Someone asked you, what do you do?
Well, I think primarily I am a food writer, and a creator of recipes and a cookbook author. But as is the case these days, you have to sort of be a jack of all trades. You have to do a lot of different things. So through my writing and through the cookbooks, I have gotten into teaching. So I teach cooking classes online and in real life. I do joint food writing workshops with a colleague, wonderful food writer and radio journalist, Kathy Gunst, who's based in Maine. And we just did a workshop in Piemonte last month that was fantastic, so much fun. And then I do occasional small group tours, culinary tours in Italy. I do those maybe once or twice a year. No big buses, small vans and vehicles, and we really try to stay as much as possible off the beaten path. And our focus is on highlighting small producers, food artisans, winemakers, and exploring Italy kind of beyond what everybody knows. And so that is pretty much what I do these days, and it's a full plate, but I really do love it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, no pun intended. So,
Yeah.
it's all about food, obviously, right? That's what you do. That's
Yes.
food. Uh,
Yes, it's all food focused.
but let me ask you something because I'm interested in your origins. Obviously you have a very Italian name. Where are you? Where are you right now?
But right now I'm in my kitchen in Northern Virginia, in Alexandria, Virginia. So I've been here for about 30 years. I was born in Yonkers, New York, and I grew up in New Jersey. So I'm an Italian American, but I'm 100%. As far as I know, I've never done my ancestry, and I'm not giving anybody my DNA, so I'm not going to do that. But my mother, my mother was born and raised in Chieti, in Abruzzo, in the province of
Oh,
Chieti,
okay.
and yeah, so she grew up there. Her father was from Perugia, and then
I
and
can't
her mother
see you
was.
anymore.
Oh, you can't see me? Hmm, that's strange. I can see you. You're frozen though. Let's see. Okay. Can you see me now?
Hold on a second. I lost you. I lost you there. Now I see you. I don't know if it was me. I
Yeah,
think it
you
might have been my connection.
you froze for a second.
Oh, okay. Sorry. No, I'm back. I'm back.
Okay,
The last
Frank
thing I
says he
heard
can
was
see us. Ciao,
yes.
Frank.
The, oh, yes. I know Frank. I mean, I not personally, but I follow his page and I see him online too. What was I going to say? Last thing I heard was your mom is from Katie. So
Yeah.
on your mom's side, you're first generation, basically, right? She grew up
Yes,
in Italy. Your mom grew up in Italy.
she grew up in Italy and came over as an adult. And her father was from Perugia in Umbria.
Okay.
And then on my father's side, he was born in Providence, Rhode Island, which has a big Italian American population. But his mother was from Isernia in Molise, and his father was from Fondi in the province of Lazio, where Rome is also located. So that sort of central south is where my people are from.
And fairly close, right? Even on your father's side, you said his parents were Italian, right? They were born in Italy.
Yes,
So it's
they were
fairly
both born
recent
in.
immigration.
Yes, exactly. So I've always felt a very deep connection to Italy, and particularly Abruzzo and also Rome. My mom had three sisters who never married, and probably in the 1960s, they moved from Chieti to Rome with their mother, my nonna. And so they lived in Rome for many years near Villa Ada. And then we had a beach house on the Adriatic coast of Abruzzo in Silvi Marina. So when I was growing up, I spent my summers in Italy, starting in Rome and then spending most of it in Silvi Marina. So I grew up with that wonderful beach life summer that is so, quintessentially Italian. And then I grew up, unfortunately, and had to go to college and start working. So that ended. But then I started going back to Italy when I started working on my cookbooks in the early 2000s, and also a little before that. But now I go often, and my husband and I have a small house in Penne in the province of Pescara, which is kind of in the hills halfway between the Adriatic Sea and the Gran Sasso d'Italia and the Apennines. So it's a
Mm,
really nice location.
that's beautiful. And so I'm always curious about this, right? So when people ask you where you're from, what do you say?
I mean, I usually say Northern Virginia or Washington, D.C., because people understand that. And I did grow up in the US, and I went to school here and college here, and my kids are here. They're grown up now, but one of them still lives with us, but she works in Washington. And then we have a son who lives in Portland, Maine. And so, I have my roots are here and they are here, but I'm in the process of finalizing my Italian citizenship, which has been a dream for a very long time and it's taken a long time. But knock wood, apparently it's happening. And with that, I will get to spend a lot more time in Italy researching and just, being there.
But I'm curious just because I had this conversation very often when I'm in the States, with Italian Americans, because a lot of people there call themselves Italians, right? In the
Yeah.
States, right? And I'm always like, I'm not arguing, but I like to push them a little bit on this,
Yeah.
because I always go like, so if you're Italian, then what am I?
Yeah. Right.
you know,
Well,
because no, I'm just curious, for me, it's more because I'm curious, I'm curious to understand
yeah.
what's your take on this, because it is something that I always try to go to them. But look, you are Italian, but you're also American, right? So why are you not Italian American? Why are you Italian, right?
Right. Well, I will tell you, I have a complicated relationship because the Italian expression "ne pesce né carne." That's
Mm-hmm.
a little bit how
Absolutely.
I feel.
Yeah.
Not fish, not meat, something in between. Because I have always identified very strongly with my Italian roots, and spending every summer there, growing up, really. I think instilled a deep love and appreciation for the country and for the people. On the other hand, like I said, I grew up here in the US. I was born here. English is my first language. I am
Mm.
fairly fluent in Italian, although I realize every time I sit down to read a novel in Italian, I realize how limited my vocabulary is, but I can certainly get by and have conversations and so yeah, and I've always identified more with my Italian side than my American side. I never felt like the American girl next door with the cutoff jeans and the sneakers and the blonde hair and California and all of those iconic American identifiers. So that's why I say ne pesce né carne, because I'm sort of halfway in between each, maybe a little bit closer to the Italian side. But I don't necessarily call myself Italian because I didn't grow up there. And there's still a lot about the country that I'm learning the more I spend time there. And I think it's a lifelong quest, basically, to understand what being Italian really is.
I mean, look. like defining these things is anyway ridiculous in my book in general. We try to put like things in containers and in boxes. I mean, even Italian,
Yeah.
what is that? Like, Italy quite a bit. There's like, I mean, I grew up in Torino. My parents are from Sicily. This like
Yeah.
might as well be two different countries. Seriously,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
especially in those days. I mean, now maybe there is a few more unifiers, but like in the end, the only thing that unifies, like in a lot of countries, is capitalism in my book. So there is some things that have been become culturally homogeneous, in Italy, but like it's such a diverse country anyway. It's such a regional place, such a your own little town kind of universe that I
Yes.
don't even know what that means in general. But then it kind of depends. I mean, look, in a macro context, I feel very similar because um, I grew up in Torino. I spent most of my childhood in Torino, but everyone is Sicilian in my family on both sides. Even my grandparents immigrated north, so we spent time with them. They spoke Sicilian. We cooked Sicilian food at home, and it's really Western Sicilian, which is a particular thing. So I always felt really close to Sicily. But the minute I open my mouth, I don't sound Sicilian. So
Right.
and I can even speak Sicilian, but because that's what people spoke at home a lot. But whenever I went to Sicily, uh, back in the day, there was also a lot more racism between North and South, both
Sure.
directions. So, it's like they were immediately like, whoa, 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 who are you? You Torinese are not allowed to speak Sicilian here. This is not your thing, not.
Yeah.
So I always felt totally in between. And I think, I mean, in general, this is the fate of the immigrant or first generation, second generation, or whatever.
Absolutely. Yes.
But at the same time, in the beauty lies in the subtlety, not in
Yeah.
this is pure. There is no pure. What is pure anyway, right?
No, exactly. There's no such thing, and anybody who believes it is fooling themselves. But that's the beauty of Italy. And before we went live, we were talking a little bit about this. How I always thought that by the time I hit middle age, in which I am firmly ensconced now, if not beyond, I thought I would have traveled a lot more around the world. But when it comes down to it, all I ever really want to do is go back to Italy because it is so many worlds in one. It's a small country, but every region is vast and broad and deep, in terms of um, uh, culture and people and traditions and food. And so whenever I travel there, I learn so much. No matter how many times I've been to a place, there's always something new to discover. And that's even true of my home region, Abruzzo, where I have spent so much time. Whenever I go back, I find a new dish. Okay, maybe it's an ancient dish, but it's new to me, or a town, or you were talking about Le Marche and this town where they make accordions, and I was talking about the town Pretoro where they make la chitarra for the pasta. And you think about how many centuries people have been mining Italy, for history, for art, for food, for everything. And there's, I feel like there's still so much to discover. It's hard for me to want to go anywhere else.
Yeah. And sorry, just going back, I'm just curious about the experience of growing up in an Italian American household. So did your parents speak Italian to you, or did your father speak Italian when you were a kid, or
My father, who was born
sorry, your mother was born
My
in Italy.
mother was born in Italy, so
Yes, sorry.
Italian was her first language, and she spoke Italian to us when we were little, but she also spoke English because I think she was trying to learn. So at a certain point, we would even speak more English to her than Italian, and she was fluent in English. She came over to the US when she was quite young. She was in her 20s, and and then she met my dad on a blind date in New York and
What?
stayed and married him. So her mother wanted her to go back to Italy. But
Of course.
anyway, yeah, yeah, it's a great story. But so I learned Italian through her and then through going to Italy in the summer because her sisters did not speak Italian. Excuse me, they did not speak English. They spoke Italian. And so I spoke to my aunts and my grandmother in Italian, and then just meeting people, and all my friends were Italian. They were actually, there was our comitiva in the summer was mostly people from Naples. So
Oh, wow.
learned the Neapolitan dialect. I understand it better than even I understand the Abruzzese
Oh,
dialect, which
wow.
I find really difficult to understand. So talk about, a mishmash. But so So my mom did speak a mix of Italian to us and English. On my dad's side, neither of his parents spoke English very well, but they didn't speak Italian to my dad. They wanted him to learn English. He was of that
Yeah.
generation. So he understood Italian very well and could get by in terms of speaking, but English was really his first language.
And when you were growing up, so you were in a quite Italian American environment in terms of your neighborhood, friends, family, friends, not so much.
No, I didn't have that quintessential Italian
Mm.
American experience. We grew up in a suburb, a suburban outside of Princeton, New Jersey. So if you know anything about Princeton, you know it's. I mean, there is a little there was anyway a little Italian American community in downtown Princeton, but we grew up in the suburbs. It was just, you know, the 1960s and people building houses. So we were not in an Italian neighborhood. My dad grew up in an Italian neighborhood in Providence, but he moved to New Jersey for work. He was a chemical engineer. And so I did not live the Italian American experience. Now, we did find our Italian American little community. My mom's best friends were two Italian American women who lived in Princeton, and their daughters went to the same little Italian, little Catholic school, that girls' school that I went to. So we found our little Italian community, but we were not immersed in that Italian American culture. And my mother would never have referred to herself as Italian American. She was kind of um a little dismissive of the Italian American
I
culture.
was just going to ask you because I'm so curious about this.
Yeah.
So I was just going to ask you, what did your mother think about Italian American culture?
Yeah, I mean, every time a commercial came on TV for like ragu spaghetti sauce or something that was very Italian American, she just would wrinkle her nose and say something bad about it. But so she was always, you know, I mean, because she was born and raised there, she always considered herself Italian, although she did become an American citizen. And
Mm.
at the time she became an American citizen, she had to renounce her Italian citizenship. That was the law.
Oh,
So
wow.
she did that. So, yeah, but, you know, she was always an Italian.
I mean, that's a piece of, that's a little book and a piece of paper. It doesn't
Yeah,
mean that you renounce to your culture,
yeah,
really.
exactly, exactly.
So, oh yeah, so basically, you're saying, actually, I'm just curious, so what
Yeah.
is the Italian American experience? Can you describe it to me the way you understand it?
I
What
mean,
does it mean?
I I don't know, except for I think of what I think of is I think of a more urban or, you know, just outside, like some. I just think of neighborhoods that have mostly people with Italian backgrounds. You know, I think of like Staten Island or the North End of Boston, or there's I can't remember the neighborhood in San Francisco, North Beach, I think, where the Italians existed. Um, Little Italy in New York, which really isn't Italian very much anymore, and many of the people have moved out. But you had that core structure of you know, values and cultural background that was similar. I think it's probably this was the same in Polish American neighborhoods and Irish American neighborhoods, and now, you know, Hispanic American, Asian American. Um, these places all kept you grounded in the place where you were from, but then things evolved, you know, because you were living in a different
Mm.
place. But so because I didn't live that experience to an extent, my.
I mean, what about your dad, right? Because your dad was also just first generation.
Yeah,
So,
he was, and he did grow up in an Italian American neighborhood, but he didn't really talk about it that much.
mm.
He's kind of a quiet, sort of private person, and so he didn't really regale us with stories about growing up. Our mother did that a little bit more.
But just in terms
Eh,
of like, because I know there is a lot of traditions, that are part of the Italian American experience that for Italians, you're going, the what? you know,
yeah, are you talking about like the Feast of Seven Fishes and things like
Something, for
that? Yeah,
example,
yeah,
stuff
yeah,
like that, that you go like, that is obviously quintessentially an Italian American thing. But I'm
yeah.
just curious to see what did your mom think about that? Or was that
I once wrote a story about it, and I said if you I can't remember what the lead was, but it was something about if you asked my mother about the feast of the Italian fishes, she would look at you like you served her a bad clam or something, because she didn't, that was not a tradition she had ever heard of. And while we did do La Vigilia, we did do all of the fish. We had a lot of fish dishes. We never called it the Feast of the Seven Fishes. We didn't count how many fish we cooked and ate. We only started doing that when my sister's husband, who was a part Polish and part Italian American, joined the family, and the Feast of the Seven Fishes was something that he grew up with. So we started in kind of incorporating that a little bit tongue in cheek. But it wasn't anything we had ever heard of. Now it's so popular. Restaurants do it at Christmas time, and it's a lot of fun, actually. I mean, I think it's a great tradition, and it is, I mean, if it's a way for you to stay connected to the place your people came from, I think it's wonderful. I
Why do
just
you think, though? Why do you think Italians are mad about this stuff? Because this is
Well,
something
because
that I'm
Italians
fascinated.
are opinionated, and maybe they feel like their culture is being appropriated. That which is very interesting, because I think it's almost impossible to say that to talk about a cultural appropriation when you're talking about Italian, because the connection between America and Italy goes back to Thomas Jefferson and the very origin of the US. He had an Italian winemaker come over to the US in the 18th century. He planted fig trees, he planted wine grapes. He brought rice over from Italy. He brought macaroni over from Italy and ice cream. So our two countries have been connected since America's earliest days, which I think is fascinating and wonderful. And people forget that.
No, no, for sure. I mean, for me, I'm fascinated because for a long time, my instinct was also going like, "What is this? This is not Italian food," you know. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of this has to do with what I was saying at the very top of our chat, with the fact that people call it Italian as opposed to Italian American, or
Yeah.
sometimes I even want to say American Italian, you know, because
Yeah.
I see the American side a lot. A lot of American people don't want to identify with the word American. I've actually had this conversation where people told me, "Yeah, that's not a culture, American," and I was like, "Hello." Yes, it is. I'm sorry. You know, this is like one of the most
Yeah.
powerful
Oh, for
cultural
sure.
countries in the world.
Yeah.
You're telling me that you don't. But anyway, whether you like it or not is a different story. But
Yeah.
but for me, there's a couple of different points that I'm interested in. You know, one of them is that a lot of people that nowadays are the purists in Italian culture, especially food culture, they actually don't know history, and they don't really understand how traditional food works and how oral culture works. So all of this, there is one way to cook this. This is like, I'm sorry, this is
Yeah.
BS. But I mean, so many Italians will die on that, you know, hill.
Well, it's true. They will die on that hill. And there are also people who work very hard to debunk those myths
Yeah,
about
exactly.
purism. Like, I think about the carbonara I grew up with,
Oh
that
God.
was my mom's, and it's so different from having to make that sauce and emulsion and all of
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
And
the carbo
you know,
crema, that's so
yeah, yeah, yeah,
crazy.
which did not exist when I grew up. And so, like you say, the purists may think that's what it has always been, but that's not. Food is always evolving,
But
and
no, exactly. So the interesting thing for me is that when you think about immigration, especially for, you know, if you think about the majority of when the Italians came to the United States, you know, in the whatever, late 19th century, early 20th
yeah,
century, right? Um, so what happens is that in some of those communities, bizarrely enough, some things that then basically disappeared where they came
yeah,
from existed still, you know. So
yeah,
I always bring this example because I told you my family is from Sicily, and people go all up in arms about spaghetti meatballs, like it's not a thing in Italy, it doesn't exist, and blah blah blah. But it's like my aunt used to serve spaghetti and meatballs, big meatballs, not like the little ones
not
that you
like
serve in
palotte,
Central,
yeah,
yeah, on the
yeah,
Palatine, on the same plate, totally. no problem, you know. So this, you know, and because again, a lot of the majority of the people came from Sicily or from Naples, especially in that
Right.
coast area, you know, some of the things maybe, you know, existed before and they sort of became, you know, now you will not find it in a restaurant. You will not go to Sicily in a restaurant and order spaghetti with meatballs, but it
Right.
is something that was served at home. And,
Yeah.
you know, so stuff like that is interesting. What I think is just interesting to remember is that so there is sometimes a vacuum in immigrant communities where certain things that came from such a long time ago, like the language. The language in my family, I have family in the States, like everyone, you know, like every Sicilian there in California, in Monterey. And the language that they spoke, even Sicilians could not understand sometimes, you know, because it was this mashup of early 20th century Sicilian mixed up with American English,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. It's
So,
well, and I think like even now there are colloquialisms and expressions in Italian that I don't remember from my teen years. You know, the
oh,
turns
totally,
of
yeah.
phrase from the 70s and the 80s are not there anymore, and instead there are other words and other terms that people use. So the language, like the food, is always evolving. You know, I've been working on this book on Italian cookies that is coming out in April,
Oh,
and
yes.
so one of the things that was really interesting was that it's Italian, not Italian American cookies. So it's all regional Italian cookies from all of the regions. But of course, there are so many cookies, biscotti, biscuits, if you're, I guess, British. There's so many that I could only include so many in the book. And I'm already living in fear of the backlash I'm going to get because I didn't include this cookie from this region or that cookie from that region, or I don't have cookies that are iconic Italian American cookies, like the rainbow cookie. I don't know if you're familiar
No.
with that.
Actually, I
So
was just going to ask you because you mentioned the Italian American
yeah.
cookie, and I was like,
And
what is that?
that's a whole other book on its own, I think, because I mean, and there are some, there's definitely a lot of overlap. There are,
Mm,
you know, the butter cookies, the frollini. There are almond cookies, pasticcini di mandorla, or amaretti, stuff like that, that you'll see in both Italian American bakeries and in the pasticceria in Italy. But the rainbow cookie is something special. It is a tiered it's almost like a cake cookie. It's made with almond flour, and then it's got a layer of apricot or raspberry jam, and then a thin layer of chocolate, and then it's frosted, or maybe it's just frosted with a thin layer of chocolate, and then cut into bars. So it's and it the cake layers are dyed pink and green. So you've got a green layer of the cookie, a white layer, and then a pink layer. And so it's called either the 7-layer cookie or the Italian rainbow cookie. But I've never
okay.
ever seen it in Italy ever. So I didn't include it in the book. And
So I'm Googling it because I just want to see it now.
yeah,
Rainbow cookie.
I'm afraid they're going to come after me with pitchforks because I didn't
Oh, wow.
include the rainbow
So
cookie.
it's
But
like soft. It's like a spongy
yeah, it's
thing.
a bit like you know, it's dense. It's really good. It's dense and it's delicious. I think I'm gonna have to put a recipe
Wow.
on in my newsletter when the book comes out because I know folks are going to be asking about it. But so that was something I had to wrestle with. Did I want this to be a cookie book that you know encompassed Italian and Italian American? In the end, I just had to go with Italian because it was very regional and so I had to make that decision. So
And do
the
you
two
think
of
what is the main difference between Italian and Italian American cookies? If you could come up with
um,
one.
I mean, I don't, I think that what you tend to see in Italian American bakeries is it's a smaller selection of cookies,
Mm.
whereas if you go all over Italy, there's so many different kinds. It's impossible. It's almost impossible to document them all. Um, and I learned about so many cookies that I didn't realize existed in Italy when I was working on this book. Other than that, I think, um, you know, I think there are I'm thinking of the bakeries in New York that I've visited and in New Jersey and other places. Um, there are, they do have mostaccioli, they have amaretti, they do have traditional Italian cookies, and these cookies have persisted over the years. I think they do things like biscotti or cantucci. Well, they're the much bigger ones, but they do, flavors that you wouldn't see in Italy necessarily, like white chocolate and macadamia nut or that kind of thing. So they've sort of become their own thing. They've morphed and they've evolved into something maybe very different from what you would have seen originally.
I find that, I maybe correct me if I'm wrong, because as an Italian, you grow up eating a lot of biscotti, like in my generation, breakfast was biscotti, basically, but they are like the Mulino Bianco, so that is your
Yeah,
capitalism. Everyone in Italy eats Mulino Bianco, other than the nicer stuff that you get, but that's more for special occasions, right?
yeah, yeah,
On the daily, you eat this biscotti. And I remember the first time I moved out of Italy when I was 19, I all of a sudden realized the rest of the world doesn't eat these type of biscuits. Not only they don't eat them for breakfast, they just don't exist. That it was like, even when I moved to Ireland, I remember I was struggling trying to figure out, unless you find the Italian place that imports Italian biscuits,
yeah, yeah,
like you either have the super sweet cookie, which is more feels like an American kind of thing,
for sure.
or you have like those insanely boring, like more in the direction of digestive biscuit, where it's literally like, oh my God, how can you eat this? It's so dry. I mean,
Yeah.
they can be good too, digestive biscuits.
I
But
love digestives, I have
yeah,
to say. I
in
really do
fairness,
like
they're
them.
probably the best of that kind.
Yeah,
Yeah. But do
yeah.
you think it's a very Italian thing, this culture of biscotti in
I did.
general?
Well, yeah, I did. Today's newsletter, I share two recipes from a Lebanese baking book from
Oh,
by
yeah.
my friend Maureen Aboud, and I chose the two recipes I chose are cookies, and they reminded me of Sicilian or Southern Italian cookies. One is coated in sesame seeds, and it has
Yeah,
the
of course.
texture similar to the reginelle, and
Mhm.
then the other one is a coconut macaroon. So, which you don't really see in Italy. It's kind of like amaretti, but amaretti are made with ground almonds and not coconut. But in the Italian bakeries in the US, you do see coconut macaroons a lot.
And oh yeah, macaroons, so they're kind of soft, like a bit squidgy.
Yeah, yes, a little bit squidgy. Not the French macaron, but
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
macaroons are. And then these ones have the cherry on top, so they reminded me of the pasticcini di mandorla. And I thought, oh, I'm gonna, so I shared those two recipes, and so I do think there are other cultures beyond Italy, but I also think that cookies for breakfast is a very Italian thing, and the book has several recipes for really good big dunking cookies like biscotti della nonna, serpette, just the kind that biscotti da inzuppo, that are meant to be dunked in cappuccino. And I think that's a very Italian thing. And
So I have a memory there. We have my aunt in Sicily who's still alive. She's 90 something, Zia Sarina. She's amazing. On my father's family, they're from Castelbuono, which is kind of inland from Cefalù. And she used to send us every year around Christmas a box, like a huge box of handmade biscuits. She made like 5 or 6 different types. Some decorated with nice like glaze and colors and little diavolicchi, they call them. Those are, it's like, what are they called? No, confetti. Is that what they call them in English? The colorful little
oh,
sugar
yeah, yeah,
bits.
yeah, yeah. Confetti, yeah.
Yeah,
No, no, no,
it's just,
no. The sprinkles, yeah,
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 yeah, the sprinkles. Yeah, yeah, exactly. In the town, they call diavoliki, like little
yeah.
devils. I think it's hilarious. But that's the kind of thing, she would send them. And when you put them, those handmade biscuits, when you put them in like in a big tin that really closes properly, they last for a really long
They
time.
last for so long, and that was one of the fun things. When I was testing recipes, I had cookies everywhere coming out my ears, and I would put them in tins, and sometimes I froze them, sometimes I'd just leave them out, and they would last for weeks and weeks. And yeah, it's just incredible the variety that exists. And when you talk about, I think of the come si chiamano, buccellati or cuccidati,
Okay.
those cookies with the sprinkles on them and the fig paste inside.
Oh.
Those are so good. So,
But all the pasta di mandorla as well, they also last
yes.
really, really long. We used to also bring them back from Sicily, and they would literally be for months.
So delicious, yeah. So I have a variety of amaretti and pasticcini di mandorla, and there's amaretti up in the north too, in
Hmm.
Piemonte
Yeah, yeah,
and
absolutely.
Lombardy, and there's amaretti abruzzesi, which are big and rustic and really delicious. And then you have the beautiful pasticcini di mandorla with the almond or the cherry on top. They're just so colorful and particular. Yeah, it was a real learning experience.
No, that's super interesting. I look forward to that book because it's something that I miss a lot, and sometimes I go, I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
I'm not a really great baker. I don't feel attracted to baking very often, but biscotti is something that I miss. And when I say biscotti, I mean biscuits in
Cookies,
general.
yes, yes.
Because I always get so confused in the States that they call biscotti cantucci, and I'm like, no, those are cantucci. Why do you call them biscotti?
Yeah, I know. And if I were to name the book Italian biscotti, or that would not, people in America would be very
We'll be
confused over that. So I
confused.
had to use the term cookies, and I think it works. But and then there's, just like all of Italian cookies, the cookies are very regional, and they speak of terroir, butter in the north, olive oil in the south, almonds in the south, and mosto cotto, and ingredients like that. So it's really a kind of a tour of Italy by way of cookie, I guess. Is
No, no, absolutely. No, that's very exciting. It's also I don't think there are many books out there like that,
I don't
that I've
think
seen in
so.
the
I
English
don't think
language.
so. Yeah, yeah.
And do you, because I'm guessing that a lot of your audience is English speaking, right? Am I right?
Yeah,
Mostly.
I think the majority, yeah.
It was also, it's an interesting conversation because I think the cookbook word in Italy is quite different. I was having this chat with Emiko last time when she was here. I don't know if you know her,
Of
because
course, yeah.
I find that this type of really nice cookbook that has a lot of stories and beautiful photography, it sounds like there is a much smaller market in Italy for that. It's either those very like basic, just mostly text, hundreds of
Yeah.
recipes book, or some kind of celebrity influencer type of books. But the beautiful cookbook seems to be a little bit less. But what what's your reception in Italy? Like, do you have a lot of people that follow you from Italy, or did you ever get any kickback from Italy, or people being not nice?
People have been very nice and supportive, and I think a couple of my books, at any rate, I remember have been. I remember seeing them in Feltrinelli, at the airport, and in cities, and
So
so
they're all being translated in Italian, right? Your book, or
I'm trying to remember if I saw them in English or Italian. I think a couple have been translated, but not all of them.
okay,
And but generally, I have to say the reception has been very positive, and I think it's because of my journalism background. My dirty little secret is that I never went to culinary school. So I'm a total home cook and baker, but I did go to graduate school for journalism at Columbia. And so I was a newspaper reporter
okay,
before
wow.
I started becoming a freelance writer. And so I use my journalism skills all the time when I'm researching my books. And so to me, that's super important. I love to shine a light on Italian food artisans and traditions. And, I really try to do more than just the recipe,
Mhm.
because to me, cooking and baking is more than just, the best cookie recipe you'll ever need, or the best cake recipe, whatever. To me, that stuff, yeah, maybe you'll come up with a beautiful cake, but I want something that has a soul. And to me, that's in the stories.
And no, for sure. I mean, also these days is like there's so much recipes everywhere, that it's also like that's why I think Substack is great because I feel like most people who are there are also interested in telling stories and reading about
Yeah, I
stories.
think so.
And do you ever feel that, because obviously you are so strongly connected to Italian culture and to Italy, but at the same time you're traveling to Italy to a certain extent, right? do you feel it gives you a different overview or look on things? Do you feel consciously about that, or?
Yeah, I think so. I think sometimes as an outsider, you can
Mm,
see things that somebody who's from a certain place may not see. And I also think there are people who do that even better than I do because I've been so connected to Italy for so long. Um, but I sometimes I'll come across a post or a newsletter by somebody who's not been in Italy that long, but it gives them like a whole new perspective on it. And it'll be something that I've taken for granted for years and years and never even thought about like bringing up or writing about or whatever. But when you come from the outside, you look at everything with new eyes and you can sometimes even teach people from that place something that maybe didn't occur to them because they're so used, it's second nature. It's like the air around them, you don't notice it.
no, for sure, for sure. I'm curious though, because you said you didn't really study at culinary school, right? So where did you learn to cook? Was this at home with your mom?
My mom, yeah, she was a wonderful home cook. Now, she
Hmm.
didn't grow up cooking because she had a cook in her family. But when she moved to the US and got married, her mother gave her adaboni,
Of
in
course.
talismana, which has just been translated into English, like a big new edition.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But
And
it's not the first time, right? There must be
it's
some
not
older.
the first time, but the previous version was very much edited and very
Mm.
limited and small, and it was a completely different thing. This one really tries to remain true to like the enormity of this book and how important it was in the Italian kitchen. And then I think she also had Pellegrino Artusi. And I don't have her Artusi. I don't know what became of that, but I have a wonderful translation of it that came out a couple of decades ago. And so, okay, I forgot where I was going with
You were saying
this.
that she had the book.
She
She had to
had
learn to cook.
she learned to cook, and her mother used to cook. I mean, they had a cook, but her mother also used to cook, so I think she learned a little from that. But when she was a young bride and young mother, she taught herself Italian cooking, and she did some regional Abruzzese cooking, but she made wonderful lasagna verde alla bolognese. She made lots of different, recipes beyond Abruzzo, although she also did wonderful spaghetti alla chitarra. And I think in my archives and my Substack, I have her recipe in there, and it's also in my pasta book. But so she was kind of a self-taught cook, and when my sister and I were little, we would help her in the kitchen. We would, help her form the ravioli. She liked to cook a lot, so we didn't get to help her that much because she was one of those people who's like, "Oh, it's easier if I do it." But I
Yeah, my
learned
mom
through
too.
osmosis. Yeah, right. And I think she enjoyed it very much, and I think it made her feel connected to Italy in her New Jersey kitchen, So,
Yeah.
so she did a lot of um, uh, home cooking and baking. And from the time we were very little, we would bake a lot of cookies at Christmas time. She
Mm.
would do come si dice, the crescents, I can't think of the Italian word now, the buttery, like almond crescents and hazelnut crescents. And she would do,
Like
uh,
mezzaluna type of thing. I don't know
yeah,
what they're called.
mezzaluna. She would also do, come si chiama? She called them calzonetti, but they were, um, cookies that were filled with ground almonds and citrus zest, and it was like a pasta frolla, but she would fry them.
Oh
And
wow,
her
I don't know this.
calzonelli,
Mm.
yeah, cacciuniti is another way of saying it in Abruzzese. And then my sister and I started baking as we were growing up, and we started incorporating all different kinds of cookies into our repertoire. So Christmas cookie baking was always a big thing in our house. So that
So you will make
right
like a big batch for the
Oh,
holidays or for
yes.
months.
There were years where we would make like 15 different types of cookies. Between my
Mm.
mom, my sister sister and I wrote about this in the book, how we would stay up until like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning baking and watching old Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers movies because
Mm.
they were always playing on the TV at that time of year. And so those are some of my best memories. So in a way, this cookie book was kind of like many, many decades in the making. But so she, she taught herself, and I learned through watching her and cooking with her. And then just in my teen years, I started just cooking more. And then when I was on my own, I really got interested in it, and I started to just kind of branch out.
But she
So
never actually
yeah,
taught you directly, right?
I mean, she would teach me, like, she taught me how to make gnocchi because they can be
Mm.
pretty fussy. So she directly taught me how to make gnocchi
Okay.
and some other things. And we would often, when I was older, we would often cook and bake together during the holidays. So I
Yeah.
learned her, she made calamari braised in tomato sauce every year for Christmas Eve. And then she would make a really delicious, super simple tuna ragu to go with fedellini that we would have on Christmas Eve. So all of those things we cooked together. So in a way, she did teach me. She wouldn't necessarily, make it official, but we cooked side by side together.
And I'm fairly sure she cooked, as I say, by ear, and that's the name of my page, right?
Yes, yes,
Like
exactly.
all home cooks, it's not exactly like measuring tablespoons or
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
Ah,
Right.
okay.
And when you write recipes, especially now, because
Mm.
people don't have that history of cooking with their parents necessarily, you have to be very specific about, a quarter of a teaspoon of salt, or
Yeah.
you can't do all'occhio, you can't do quanto basta.
Yeah.
You have to be very precise when you're writing recipes, even though your instinct might be, sometimes I worry about sharing too much information with readers because you want them to figure it out almost, you want to give them enough information that they can make a successful recipe, but you also don't want to do so much hand holding that you become pedantic, and that's always a worry that I have. But it's definitely and there are different cookbooks that have different audiences. So
Mm, that's the
there are
thing.
cookbooks that like if I read my mother's Adaboni, I mean, there are recipes that call for the instructions can be so vague that you really have to figure it out on your own, and it's by trial and error. But I always tell people the only way to really learn is to roll up your sleeves and do it. Even if a recipe is written specifically, you'll never understand what pasta dough should feel like until you start making it and working with it. And the more you do it, the more you understand it.
No, for sure. I mean, look, I always compare it to music because, I always say it is like it's transcribing. You're transcribing a recipe, and especially if it comes from oral culture, the transcription is just an act of that very day. This looks
Yeah.
like this. I do this sometimes with my mom, because for the same reason, I need to have measurements. So I have to literally sit behind her, and then before she puts everything in, I try to measure it, and then I turn around and she's throwing something else. I was like, no, you
Yeah.
didn't tell me, because it's such a foreign concept to that kind of cooking. But ultimately, because cooking is a multisensorial experience, right? So a transcription, in the same way with music, it's like even classical musicians who read completely written out music, it's literally an indication still. There's so
Yeah.
much that is not written there that you either have to know or you can make up. And it changes so much according to how much you know and how
Yeah.
much you're familiar with the style of cooking
Yeah.
it also, right?
Right. And there are many variables and things that you can't control, like how humid or dry it is in your
Hmm.
kitchen, or the climate, or if it's raining one day, you don't want to make meringues or they won't be crispy. And I mean, there's just you don't know what somebody else's oven is like and the temperature.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there's
exactly.
but you try to be as specific and as possible so that wherever they are, they can successfully reproduce. During the pandemic, I started teaching online cooking classes, and I did a lot of pasta classes. And I wasn't sure in the beginning if they would be successful, because when you're teaching in person, you can go around and poke somebody's dough and tell them, oh, you need
That's the
more,
thing.
flour or whatever. But when you're doing it online, I can't reach out and poke your ball of dough. But what I found was that, number one, people felt comfortable in their kitchens. Number two, I wasn't right there beside them. So they had to kind of rise to the challenge and do it. And they did. And I think it made people more confident, because, they could show me on the screen what their dough looked like, and I would ask them to poke it, and I would say, no, you need to incorporate a little bit more flour. But ultimately, they had to work at it to make it successful. And I found it to be really gratifying to see
Mm.
how people were willing to, take that extra step or figure it out for themselves. And that ultimately makes you a better cook.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I think like everything in oral culture, like even learning a language, right? The quickest way to do it is if you are with someone who is very experienced and you can learn hands on, because,
Yep.
like you said, that's irreplaceable, you know?
Yep.
So it's like, it's the equivalent of like learning a language from a book, right?
Yeah.
If you've
Yeah.
never been surrounded by people who speak the languages, it's like, it's as abstract as that. If I pick
Yeah.
up a book tomorrow about cuisine from, I don't know, the Gambia, some place that I know nothing about. You know what I mean? It would be literally the equivalent of learning a language from scratch
Yeah.
without knowing, without
Yeah.
having ever heard it. So it's definitely, I think people sometimes don't realize how complicated it is to write recipes. And that's why I wanted to talk about it, because I know that you also mentioned that that's what you do. You develop recipes, and it's an art in itself, really, right? And it's so
Yeah.
many different styles and ways of writing down recipes. And but I think it's very important what you said, that you really have to know who's your audience as well, right?
Right.
When you think about a recipe.
Yeah. It can be challenging, because you want anybody who picks up the book to be able to make a successful recipe. And at the same time, you don't want to bore experienced cooks. You want them to
Hmm.
derive pleasure and learn something too. So when I write cookbooks, I always try to include a range of recipes, simpler ones that new cooks will be able to, will immediately be able to be successful with, and then more challenging ones that maybe they can work their way towards, and that people who are more experienced in the kitchen can immediately go to, because they've done the simple stuff. But I think having a range is really good, because that means the book can stay with you as you grow as a cook or a baker. So there's a couple of really challenging cookie recipes in the cookie book,
Hmm.
but there's plenty that are super easy. Like a lot of the amaretti are easy because they're basically just egg whites and sugar and almonds,
Almonds.
Yeah. What's fascinating though is how those three ingredients can express themselves so
Hmm.
differently in the the regionality, and in just, the amounts and the technique with which they're mixed or combined. So that was another great learning experience working on this book, is how the same ingredients can have so many expressions. It's really extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so fond of almond cookies in general, because again of the Sicilian heritage. It is
Yeah,
something that
yeah.
I also think is the most perfect coffee cookie. You know what I mean? After lunch,
Yes.
un
Yes.
caffè e un amaretto, or like
Perfetto.
whatever, not amaretto, but like pasta di mandorla, like the one.
Pasta di mandorla, sì.
Especially if it's not crazy sweet, because there again you can vary degrees. But I love the texture
Yeah.
as well, the Sicilian style ones.
Yes, yeah. No,
They're kind of chewy, but so amazing.
little,
But
yeah.
so tell me, when is the book coming out? Because we've been talking about it, and I'm sure people want to know.
Yeah, this is actually the most I've spoken about it. And it's a little early. It's not coming out until April 14th, but
Okay, wow.
you can pre-order it. So you can pre-order it. through Amazon or bookshop.org, or I think I've linked to it. I wrote about the cover of the book last week in last week's newsletter, and there is a link there. There are a couple of links there for pre-ordering, and that always helps a book gain visibility. But yeah, it doesn't come out until next spring. So between now and then, I will be sharing more information about it, and eventually sharing some, sneak peek recipes and stuff like that.
And that's on your Substack, which again, I'm sure a lot of people here follow you already, but in case you don't, the page is called Buona Domenica, and you publish on Sunday, right?
Yes,
Every Sunday.
that's the double
The
meaning
pun.
of the
Yeah,
name. Yes, I
that's
publish on
perfect.
Sundays, and yeah, and it's my name.
No, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
For sure. And I was just wanted to tell people there's a funny coincidence that next week I'm going to be in the States touring with the Silk Road Ensemble, and we're playing quite close to actually where Domenica lives. So I invited her to come to the concert, and you said that you and your husband are music lovers. So, and obviously because I try to talk about food and music, obviously food for me is more of a hobby. Music is what I do professionally. But these days I'm more obsessed about food than I'm about music. Sometimes, I find all the similarities very interesting. But I was just wondering, so do you listen to music while you cook, or what's your experience connecting music and food?
Yeah, that's such a great question. A lot of the times I don't listen to music while I cook because I have a very nostalgic streak in me. And when I listen to music, sometimes it makes me really nostalgic. But so
Mm.
normally what I do is on the other side of my kitchen is our family room area, and we have a TV there. So I'm a big tennis freak, and so I have the tennis channel on mute a lot of the times. Not right now, but when I'm cooking, I keep it on mute, just to have it in the background, because I work from home and I'm by myself, and so it kind of keeps me company. But when I do listen to music, I have a very sort of 70s, 80s listening. My husband is has a much more developed ear than I do in terms of music, but I will listen to things like the Talking Heads or The Cure, or just music from I call it my era, Jackson Brown or Neil Young, or stuff like that. And there's a lot more that's coming to me that is not coming to me now. But when I do listen to music, I do like to listen to um, uh, probably more something more uplifting, like the Talking Heads, and that's coming to my mind now because I just saw David Byrne recently in concert, and so his music is in my ear these days.
But it's not something that you use to help you cook in general. It's not a part of your
Well,
landscape.
when we were doing the photo shoot for Italian
Mm.
Cookies, I wasn't in charge of the music, but the photographer and the prop stylist were putting on a lot of Italian music. So, and of course, I have the Italian music from my era. It's probably a little bit earlier than yours, but it was Pino Daniele and Lucio Dalla and Francesco De Gregori and Claudio Baglioni. And so,
Oh,
if
the
I'm listening,
songwriters. Yeah.
if I want to be inspired, those are the Italian musicians that I would tend to listen to and love
And
so
would your
much.
parents listen to some of that at home, or they would have
My
other stuff?
parents were big into Sinatra, and my
Okay.
mother loved Perry Como.
Also, they were actually Italian American music lovers.
Yes, they were. That was the one Italian American thing that my mother really loved.
Yeah,
So
that's true. That's
it's really,
interesting.
yeah, yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. I mean, I could keep you here all day talking, but, I don't want to keep you too long. But I want to ask you one more thing just because I'm curious, because Abruzzo is actually one of the regions that I know the least, especially culinarily speaking. Is that a word?
Yeah.
No? So, well, two things maybe. Is there one dish that you like immediately think of when you think about Abruzzo? That's the one question. And the other one is something that more connects to your mother's cooking and your childhood. If there is one dish again that probably connected to Abruzzo as well, that you go like, that's the one thing is my comfort food as a child that my mom always used to.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great question. So, in terms of Abruzzese cuisine, There are a few dishes that come to mind. One is the macaroni or spaghetti alla chitarra, which is the square cut noodles with the tiny pallottine. And the Abruzzese ragu is nothing like a Bolognese ragu.
Hmm.
It is large pieces of meat simmered in tomato sauce, and then the meat is taken out and maybe served as a second course. But the pallottine, the tiny veal meatballs, are for special occasion. They're really a pain to make, but they're really worth it. So it's
And they will both be part of the. I mean, they're both in the ragu, so there is like a big chunk of meat, and there is the pallottine as well,
you
or no?
take the chunk of meat, so it can be, it can be lamb and pork and sausage, and those tend to be the meats in Abruzzese cooking. Sometimes vitellone or veal, but you can take those out and serve them separately
Yeah,
after
it's the
you've
same in
served the
Sicily.
ragu.
Yeah,
Esatto, the sauce with the ragu. Another favorite is arrosticini. So I don't know
of
if you're
course.
familiar with, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So those are the lamb or mutton skewers, the castrato, that you will have in the mountains of Abruzzo. So those are cooked over the live fire, and it's a tradition to go out and have go up to the mountains to eat a batch of arrosticini, and you serve it with bread and olive oil, and there's nothing better. I mean, it's so flavorful, and it's really what the shepherds would eat when they were doing the transumanza. And now it's very popular. When I was growing up, my friends and I would have to go way into the hills to find the rosticini. Now you find them everywhere in Abruzzo. They're
Everywhere.
very popular. Yeah.
I think even
Um,
outside in other regions, I've seen arrosticini stalls, as part of street food culture.
yeah.
It has
Yeah.
become definitely a thing.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how something so simple can be so tasty. But
Exactly, because it's good ingredients. I mean, there's nothing on these lamb skewers other than a little bit of salt, not even pepper. I
yeah,
mean, it's own just the fat from the meat itself and the flame and a tiny bit of salt, and they are so good. So good.
yeah,
And then
no,
in
for sure.
terms of my mother, the two things that come to mind immediately are her, like I said, lasagna alla bolognese, which is funny because it's not Abruzzese, but it's something that she became known for. She used to do cooking classes out of her kitchen too. And so she
Wow.
would make the very thin lasagna verde.
She would make a
And
green one like the
oh,
original.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes. And then her bolognese sauce is better than any I've ever had. And I'm trying to think, I think it might be in my newsletter arc, in my index of recipes. I can't remember if I've shared her bolognese. I've got like 200 plus recipes in there, so it's hard to remember everything. But and then she would do spaghetti alla chitarra, and then I would have to say her Christmas Eve recipes, which was the tuna tomato sauce for the pasta, the calamari in umido with braised for a long time with tomato and onion, that was so delicious and very rich. And then she would fry skate wings,
Wow.
raja, yeah, and then she would do broccoli di rapa rapini, saltati. Um, and she would do verza, cavolo verza, and agrodolce. So I always associate those dishes with her, and I feel so nostalgic when I think about them. She also did a big Thanksgiving, but it was very much Italian, some of the same dishes. And then she would stuff turkey with, bread and sausage and chestnuts and, Italian flavors. So all of that.
By the way, tell me about that. So she used to do the turkey, but with
Yeah.
Italian flavor stuffing, and then
I-
the side dishes were all kind of Italian dishes.
oh, yeah. 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 Yeah.
Oh wow! And is that an Italian American thing, or was just your mom?
I mean, a lot of Italian Americans serve lasagna on Thanksgiving and a turkey, but she
Huh.
didn't do that. But I think Italian Americans do tend to bring Italian dishes into their Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's cool.
That
I
was
didn't know.
something we always did, and I still do that. We're not huge turkey lovers in my house, so we make home-style porchetta on Thanksgiving.
Wow, so much better than turkey.
Yeah, yeah.
I can
Yeah.
imagine now. So that's so you actually make the porchetta at home and you roast it and you do it
Yeah,
for a
and
lot of
I
people.
do I kind of do a lazy man's porchetta. So we don't do the loin with the pancetta. I
Mm,
just get a big fat pork shoulder,
pork butt.
and yeah, pork butt, yeah. And I butterfly it and I put all the flavorings of I do a rub with rosemary and fennel and then I roll it up and we either cook it at a low temperature in the oven or we have a rotisserie on our grill outside. So my husband will do
Amazing.
that. And yeah, that's what we've been doing lately. And we'll probably do that this Thanksgiving too.
That sounds so delicious. And look, I obviously don't come from the turkey culture in the same way, but I'm always
Yeah.
going, what is there in here? It's so dry.
I know.
It's so
I
hard to cook.
actually don't mind it, but I do like the porchetta better.
Yeah. Look, the whole context of everything else, it kind of makes sense, but I will pick the porchetta anytime over
Yeah.
that. There's so much flavor and there's all this fat and all these things, right?
And then we do American pies because we all love pie, and I
Okay.
really love pie. So we'll do a pumpkin pie and apple pie, and our daughter loves to make pecan pie. Sometimes I'll do crostata, like a nice apple crostata instead of pie, and so it is a mishmash, and it's
And
really, yeah.
you have a daughter, you were saying you.
Yes, yeah.
And
She loves baking.
is she very much into Italian cooking or food? How old is she?
She she's 27, so
Okay.
my yeah, and our son is 29, and he's very much into cooking, and he's into making homemade pasta. Our daughter, she doesn't have a lot of time now because she works and running is her pastime. She just ran the Marine Corps Marathon, last weekend. But she does like to cook. She's very much into international cooking, though. When she was a teenager, she would do things like she would make like real genuine sushi. There was a Japanese grocery that she found in DC, and she would go get, the flash frozen fresh ahi tuna and other fish and the nori and all of the ingredients to make really good sushi. She would make homemade pho, ramen, stuff like that.
Mm.
Our son is the one who's becoming more interested in Italian cooking. And so last year he was here for a little while and we did a lot of homemade pasta making, and then he learns a lot from YouTube as well, and he's very into that.
No, that's great. It's good that there is someone, there's always
Yeah.
is one person in the family usually
Yeah.
that is
Yeah,
interested in the food and the stories, I
for
guess.
sure. Yep, very important.
Very important to keep them going. Okay, well, thank you so much. It's been so nice to chat with you, and I look very much forward to your book. But I also look forward to seeing you in person.
I
Hopefully.
can't wait. My husband and I are really looking forward to the concert, and thank you for inviting us to that,
No,
and thank you for inviting me to this
thank you.
conversation. It was my first Substack Live, so I was a little nervous, but you made it
Yes,
very
no, and
easy.
you can see it's like super easy. It's so nice, and yeah, and we can send it to people who couldn't make it live, and
Great.
that's all. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in.
Thanks, everybody.
We saw there were a few little bits of comments. I didn't see any proper questions. Otherwise, I would have maybe tried to address it. But anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you, Domenica. And
Thank you.
we'll see
Alla
you soon.
prossima.
Ciao, ciao. A presto.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.